Impossible! No human possesses this sacred power.
Power means nothing if it's not used to save lives.
Your light has healed more than my body.
An entire empire fell. Not in war, not in rebellion, in silence. For 1,000 years, this empire ruled everything. They controlled planets. They controlled resources. They controlled people. Nothing could stop them. Their military was unbeatable. Their technology was advanced. Their leaders were ruthless. But then one man changed everything. In just 11 days. One man. Not a general. Not a hero. Just someone nobody expected. He did what the entire empire couldn't do in 1,000 years. He showed them the truth. He revealed their biggest secret. He broke their power without firing a single shot. But here's what shocked everyone most. Nobody saw it coming. The empire didn't see it. The governments didn't see it. The powerful people didn't see it coming either. One ordinary person did what seemed impossible. The truth behind this story will shake you. You'll discover how truth became more powerful than weapons. You'll learn why the empire collapsed from the inside. You'll understand why one person mattered more than an entire military. Let me show you exactly how this happened. For 1,000 years, nothing had changed. The empire controlled everything. From the smallest planet to the biggest cities. From the poorest people to the richest leaders. Everything belonged to them. The empire had rules. Strict rules. Nobody questioned authority. Nobody challenged the leaders. Nobody spoke against the system. If you did, you disappeared. Soldiers would come. They would take you away. Your family would never see you again. So people stayed silent. They obeyed. They worked. They lived their lives without asking questions. The empire wanted it that way. Ignorant people are easier to control. Confused people follow orders better. Scared people don't rebel. The empire had built an entire system around fear. Around control. Around keeping secrets. At the top of this empire sat the council. 5 leaders who decided everything. What people could eat. What people could say. What people could think. Nobody had ever seen them. They lived in a hidden fortress, protected by thousands of soldiers, surrounded by technology that could destroy cities. The council was untouchable, or so everyone believed. Below the council were the governors, powerful people who ruled the planets. They enforced the rules. They punished disobedience. They reported to the council. Below them were the soldiers. Millions of soldiers. The strongest military in known space. They could conquer any enemy. They could crush any resistance. They could control any population. Below the soldiers were the people. Billions of people. Workers. Teachers. Parents. Children. They lived their lives under the empire's control. They didn't know about the secrets. They didn't know about the lies. They didn't know about what the council was really doing. In the middle of this massive system sat one man. His name doesn't matter as much as his role. He was a low-level clerk, an administrator, a paper pusher. He worked in an information center, a massive building where data was stored. Documents, records, files, thousands of files. The empire kept everything documented. Every transaction, every person, every secret, all stored in this one place. The man had worked there for 5 years. He came to work every morning. He did his job. He went home. Nobody noticed him. He wasn't important. He wasn't powerful. He wasn't special in any way. At least not obviously. But the man noticed things. Small things. Strange things. He noticed that certain files were locked. Certain documents couldn't be accessed. Certain information was hidden even from high-ranking officials. He noticed that people would come to the center at night. Important people. They would search for specific files. Then the files would disappear. The man was curious. Not rebellious. Not dangerous. Just curious. What were they hiding? Why did some information matter so much? What secrets did the Empire keep? He asked his supervisor once. Big mistake. His supervisor's face changed. His eyes went cold. He told the man to forget what he had seen. He told the man to never ask questions again. He told the man that curiosity was dangerous. The man understood. He said nothing. He did his job. But the questions didn't stop. They sat in his mind. They grew. They multiplied. He started researching. Carefully, quietly. He would look at files he was supposed to access. He would read information that was meant to be boring administrative data. But he read between the lines. He noticed patterns. He found connections. Slowly a picture emerged. The Empire had a secret. A massive secret. Something they were hiding from everyone. Even from the governors. Even from the military leaders. Something so important they had locked it away in this center. The man didn't know what it was yet. But he knew it existed. And he knew it mattered. He began copying files. Carefully. One at a time. He would memorize them. Store them in his mind. He couldn't write them down. That would be too dangerous. But he could remember. He could piece things together. He could build a picture of what the Empire was hiding. Every night he would go home and think about what he had learned. Every morning he would come back and learn more. Slowly the truth was revealing itself. The man was discovering something that could change everything. He just didn't know it yet. After 3 months, he understood. The Empire wasn't what it claimed to be. The Council didn't rule because they were chosen by the people. They ruled because they had seized power. Centuries ago. Through violence. Through deception. Through lies. They had murdered the previous government. They had hidden the truth. They had rewritten history. Every textbook in every school taught lies. Every speech by the leaders contained deception. Every law was designed to protect the Council's power. Nothing about the Empire was real. Everything was fake. A massive illusion created to control people. The man understood this. But knowing wasn't the same as proving. He needed evidence. Real evidence. Undeniable proof. He continued searching. More carefully now. Because the danger was real. If the Council discovered what he was doing, he would die. Not quickly. Not mercifully. The Empire had prisons for people who knew too much. Torture chambers. Places where people disappeared forever. The man had heard stories. Whispered stories. From people who had family members vanish. He was risking everything. But he couldn't stop. The truth had become more important than his safety. He found records of the original government. Hidden in encrypted files. Deep in the database. Records showing how the Council had killed the previous leaders. Records proving the Empire had murdered thousands of people to seize power. He found communication logs. Messages between Council members discussing how to control the population. How to spread propaganda. How to keep people ignorant. He found financial records, showing that the Council and the governors were stealing from the people. Billions of credits, taken from hospitals, schools, infrastructure, all hidden away in secret accounts. He found military plans. Plans to eliminate anyone who threatened the Council's power. Plans to take over neighboring empires. Plans that involved killing innocent people. The man had all the proof he needed. He had evidence of corruption. Evidence of murder. Evidence of lies. Evidence that the entire empire was built on deception. Now what? He couldn't go to the authorities. The authorities worked for the empire. He couldn't tell the governors. The governors were part of the corruption. He couldn't speak to the military. The military would execute him. He couldn't even tell his family. That would put them in danger. He was completely alone, with dangerous knowledge, and nowhere to turn. He spent weeks thinking about what to do. He considered destroying the files, making the evidence disappear. Then nobody would know. The empire would continue, but millions of people would keep living under lies. Children would keep being taught falsehoods. The cycle would continue forever. He considered killing himself. Maybe that would be easier. Maybe that would be better than living in fear. But that felt like giving up, like accepting that the empire won. He refused. There had to be another way. And then he had an idea. Dangerous, possibly insane, but it might work. He would release the information. All of it. To everyone. Simultaneously. He would make copies. Thousands of copies. Of every document. Every record. Every piece of evidence. And he would distribute them. To the people. To the soldiers. To the governors. To everyone. If the truth was everywhere, the council couldn't suppress it. If millions of people had the information, they couldn't silence everyone. The empire's power was based on controlling information, on keeping secrets. If these secrets were exposed, the power would crumble. But how could he do it? The empire monitored everything. Communications, movements, internet traffic. He would be caught instantly. He started planning anyway. He had to find a way. He had to figure out how to release the information without being caught. He had 11 days before his supervisor would audit the files. 11 days before the missing documents would be discovered. 11 days before the empire came for him. He had to move fast. And he had to be perfect. The man began his work. Carefully, methodically. He couldn't make mistakes. One error and everything would be discovered. One mistake and he would be arrested. He started creating copies. Not digital copies. Those could be traced. Not physical documents. Those could be found. He used the oldest method possible. He memorized everything. His photographic memory became his greatest weapon. He would read a document, store every word, every number, every detail. Then he would go home and write it down. By hand, on paper. Then he would burn the paper. No evidence, no traces, just information stored in his mind. But that wasn't enough. He needed to distribute the information. And he needed to do it in a way that the empire couldn't stop. He started making connections. Carefully, he would talk to people at work. Casual conversations. About weather. About their families. About their concerns. He was listening for something. A sign. A hint that someone else was questioning the empire. He found him. Another worker. A woman. She had asked a question once. A simple question. But it revealed doubt. Doubt about the system. The man took a risk. He told her the truth. Not all of it. Just enough. The woman's reaction was shock. Fear, but also recognition. Like she had always known something was wrong. She believed him, and she had something he needed. A sister, who worked in communications, who had access to broadcast systems. The man recruited her carefully. He showed her evidence. He explained the plan. She was terrified, but she was also angry. Angry at the lies. Angry at the deception. Angry at what the empire had done. She agreed to help. One by one, the man found others. A soldier who had lost his family to the council's programs. A teacher who was tired of teaching lies. A doctor who had seen the empire suppress medical discoveries. a scientist who had been silenced for speaking truth, an engineer who had built weapons and felt guilty. 12 people from different parts of the empire, each with access to something important, each with a reason to rebel. But they weren't revolutionaries. They weren't terrorists. They weren't trying to start a war. They just wanted to tell the truth. The man created a schedule, a plan, coordinated timing. The woman in communications would broadcast the information at a specific moment, across all channels, interrupting every transmission, every screen, every communication device. The soldier would send the files to his military unit. The teacher would share with every school in her region. The doctor would distribute to hospitals. The scientist would send to research centers. The engineer would transmit to military installations. Everyone would release the truth simultaneously, from multiple locations, in different ways. The Empire couldn't stop everyone at once, couldn't silence all the voices, couldn't suppress information coming from a dozen different sources. The plan was set for the 11th day. The man returned to work. He continued as normal, copying files, storing information, waiting. Nobody suspected anything. His supervisor noticed nothing unusual. The council had no idea what was coming. The other workers had no clue. The military didn't sense danger. The Empire continued as it always had. Powerful, untouchable, unawares. The man felt calm, strangely calm. He had accepted what was coming. Whatever happened after the truth was released, it was worth it. His life wouldn't matter anymore. But the truth would. The Empire would never be the same. That was enough. Day 11 arrived. The man's hands were shaking. Just a little. Nobody would notice. But he felt it. His body knew what was happening. What was about to happen. He came to work like normal. He sat at his desk. He worked on his regular tasks. He waited for the signal. At exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the signal came. A simple message. From the woman in communications. One word. Now. The man stood up. He walked to the communication terminal. He uploaded the files. All of them. Thousands of documents. Millions of pieces of information. Decades of secrets. Everything the Empire had hidden. Simultaneously, across the Empire, others were doing the same. The soldier was distributing files to his unit. The teacher was sending information to her students. The doctor was posting documents in the hospital. The scientist was uploading to research networks. The engineer was broadcasting to military systems. Everything happened at once. The Empire's information systems were overwhelmed. Too much data. Too many sources. Too impossible to stop. Within minutes, the truth was everywhere. On screens. On networks. In communication systems. Spreading. Growing. Multiplying. People started reading the documents. Soldiers started seeing the evidence. Teachers started understanding the lies. Doctors started realizing what they had been forced to hide. Scientists started discovering what the council had suppressed. The truth was undeniable. There was too much evidence. Too many sources. Too many people seeing it simultaneously. The Empire tried to respond. The council ordered the military to shut down communications. But the information was already spreading. Person to person. Message to message. Word of mouth. You can't stop information once it's released. You can't recapture truth once it's spoken. Within hours, people were protesting. Quietly at first, then loudly. Demanding answers. Demanding accountability. Demanding change. The soldiers didn't know what to do. Some were conflicted. They had seen the evidence too. They were learning that the government they had served was built on lies. Some were angry. Angry at the council. Angry at being manipulated. Some remained loyal, but they were outnumbered by the confusion, by the doubt, by the realization that nothing was true. The governors tried to maintain control, but the people weren't listening anymore. The illusion had broken. Once people know the truth, you can't make them unknow it. The council attempted something desperate. They ordered a military lockdown. They tried to arrest the 12 people who had released the information. But it was too late. The man had already disappeared. He had prepared for this. He had a plan for escape. The others had scattered. Some were caught. Some escaped. But it didn't matter. The information was out. The truth couldn't be suppressed. Within 3 days, the first governor was removed. He tried to flee, but was stopped by his own people. Within 4 days, another region declared independence. They rejected the council's authority. Within 5 days, protests had spread to every planet. Millions of people demanding change. The military was fragmented. Some units supported the council. Some supported the people. Some refused to fight. Violence erupted. But it wasn't the violence of the empire-crushing dissent. It was the violence of people fighting back. Fighting for truth. Fighting for freedom. Within 7 days, the first council member was captured. He tried to escape on a ship, but was stopped at the docking station. Arrested, facing trial for crimes against humanity. Within 8 days, the empire's government had essentially ceased to exist. There was no authority anymore. No structure. Just chaos. Beautiful, liberating chaos. People were finally free to think. To question. To speak. The entire system had collapsed. Not through military conquest. Not through invasion. Through truth. Through information. Through one ordinary man who decided to take a risk. By day 11, the empire that had ruled for 1,000 years was gone. Replaced by something new. Something uncertain. Something built on truth instead of lies. The man emerged from hiding after 2 weeks. The empire was in complete transition. New leaders were being chosen. Different systems were being built. The people who had been silent for 1,000 years were finally speaking. The man became famous. Not because he wanted to be, but because people recognized what he had done. He had changed everything. He had ended a 1,000-year reign. Without violence. Without an army. Without weapons. Just with truth. Different regions were reorganizing. Some formed new governments. Some tried democracy for the first time. Some experimented with different systems. It was messy. It was confusing. It was imperfect. But it was real. It was honest. It was built on truth instead of lies. The 12 people who had helped were also recognized. But the man understood something important. It wasn't about him. It wasn't about recognition. It was about what happened next. How would people handle freedom? How would they build something better? How would they ensure this never happened again? The former council members faced trials. Some were executed. Some were imprisoned. Some escaped. The trials were complicated. Questions arose about justice, about revenge, about forgiveness. The man testified. He explained how he had discovered the truth. He showed the evidence. He answered questions for weeks. It was exhausting. It was painful. Reliving the fear. Reliving the danger. But it was necessary. People needed to understand what the council had done. How bad it really was. The truth needed to be official. Documented. Undeniable. New systems were built. Transparency became a value. Secrets became taboo. Information became public. Governments were forced to be honest. It wasn't perfect. Corruption still existed. But it was impossible to hide anymore. Other empires watched. They were terrified. They worried the same thing could happen to them. Some reformed their governments. Some increased surveillance hoping to prevent truth from spreading. Some tried to suppress the story. But it was impossible. The man's story had already spread across known space. People everywhere knew what was possible. They knew that truth could defeat power. They knew that one ordinary person could change everything. The man eventually stepped back from public life. He didn't want power. He didn't want control. He wanted something simpler. A normal life. Peace. Quiet. But he was never truly unknown again. He had become a symbol that change was possible, that truth mattered, that ordinary people could do extraordinary things. The real shock wasn't what the man did. It was how he did it. He didn't use violence. He didn't need weapons. He didn't require an army. He only used truth. And truth was more powerful than the entire military of the empire. The council had spent 1,000 years building walls to keep secrets, creating systems to control information, using fear to keep people quiet. But all of that crumbled when truth was revealed. Because truth is inevitable. You can delay it. You can hide it. You can suppress it temporarily. But eventually truth emerges. And when it does, nothing can stop it. The man had learned something crucial. Power based on lies is fragile. Power based on truth is strong. The empire had chosen lies. That's why one man could destroy it. If the empire had been honest, if the council had been transparent, if the system had valued truth, no one person could have changed it. But built on deception, vulnerable, breakable, destroyable by one ordinary person with courage. What you just witnessed proves something crucial. One honest person can matter more than an entire empire. Truth is more powerful than weapons. Information is more dangerous than armies. The man did what the entire military couldn't do in 1,000 years. He proved that change doesn't require violence. It requires courage. It requires speaking up. It requires choosing truth over safety. This story changed how millions think about power, about resistance, about what's possible. 3 key takeaways. First, systems built on lies are fragile. Second, one person can matter more than you realize. Third, truth always wins eventually. Subscribe for more stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Like if this challenged how you think about power. Comment what you would do if you discovered something similar. Join our community for deeper explorations. We share untold stories of human courage weekly. Watch our next video revealing 3 more impossibilities conquered through truth. If you had discovered what this man knew, what would you have done? Share in comments